Hello everyone and welcome to AndyDavo's guide to Chaos Renegades in Blood Bowl 3. This video we're going to cover several things. First of all, we're going to look at the players and what they do. We're going to look at how to level up the players on the team. We're going to look at some starting rosters, of which there are an awful lot of different permutations this time around. We're going to talk about inducements and what you want to be looking for and making your team better on pitch. And then finally, I'm also going to cover off some defensive and offensive setups with some reasoning to explain why those setups are so good. Now, Chaos Renegades are a brand new team to online Blood Bowl, previously known as Chaos Pact on tabletop, and they're probably one of the teams in Blood Bowl 3 that I'm most looking forward to playing. They could have up to, I believe, 9 different players on the pitch, and they've actually got 10 different players to pick from overall. So therefore, their standard roster can be played in a variety of different ways. However, because they've got Chaos in the prefix, they are very fighty generally, and they do lean towards fighting as their style of play. However, as we can see on the picture here, over here we've got a Dark Elf, so they do have an Elf player, which means that you can move the ball around a little bit, and they are known to do a little bit of ball flair from time to time. Overall, probably one of the things that stands out is the roster has the access to 3 big guys as opposed to 1. There are actually 4 to pick from, so that's their sort of unique selling point. In summary, the strengths and weaknesses I would categorise are strengths. They've got the ability to field 3 big guys. That's a very, very strong front line. They've got good skill access across the board, and there are an awful lot of development options, so you can take the team in a variety of different ways. However, weaknesses, almost all the players have got animosity, so moving the ball around is quite hard work. There are 3 big guys potentially on the team, so instead of just having 1 player not do as it's told, you've got 3 per turn, so planning your turns can be very, very complicated. The positionals, as they're described on this team, are actually just linemen for pretty much every other team, so they're not actually that great. The whole roster is very expensive, and finally, as with all the other Chaos Deity teams, they've got no core starting skills, so they're quite a challenging start. So, with that in mind, let's go and have a look at the players themselves and an introduction to level ups and how you build a team. Okay, everyone, let's look at level ups and the players themselves. Now, in the previous guides, I've actually already pre-populated this, but because the Chaos Renegades are so complicated, I've actually gone with a blank slate and we can build it together. So, first of all, we're going to look at the big guys. We're allowed to choose any 3 from 4, and we can only pick each individual one a maximum of 1 time. So I'm going to hire the 3 just on the left hand side here, and probably the first thing you'll already notice is the player costs. They're very expensive, and therefore that impacts your ability to build a roster, which we'll cover shortly. So we'll purchase those and we'll recruit, and we'll go into the player screen and we'll look at them. So the Renegade Minotaur is pretty much the same as a Chaos Minotaur, with broadly just one real change, which is that mutations are on a secondary skill and not on a primary skill, and therefore sticking Claw on it as its first level up is not absolutely viable straight away. You can still do it, and so a lot of people will play and build with the Minotaur. It's got Mighty Blow, it's got Frenzy, it's going to knock things over, it's going to generate star player points, and actually their first skill pick will be still with Claws, and they'll save up for a secondary. At that point, they'll probably keep building, and they'll go to the general pool, and then they'll take block. I myself probably would do that in reverse. I think it's slightly less damage output, but it's a lot safer, and this team is already very, very unwieldy in some respects. So for me, I would go general skill block as a secondary. Then I would consider Claws to make sure it's got some firepower, and then I would go to the primary tree, and I would take guard. At that point, that player's pretty much done, and we don't need to think about it much further than that. And you're probably outside the realms of this guide. So they're the 3 skills that I think you should look at. If you do want just a couple of extra flavour skills, stand firm's quite nice, and defensive or pro, in fact I'd say pro probably over defensive, are other skill picks that are of a good value. Okay, next we're going to go and look at the next player, which is the Ogre. The Ogre is indeed exactly the same as the Human Ogre from the previous iteration of Blood Bowl. However, again, it's got mutations access, so you can do some funky things with it. Now, because it's got Bonehead, which means that when you move it, it only doesn't move on a d6 roll of a 1, then you can do things like guard, stand firm, you can go to tentacles, and you can build it as a roadblock. So previously the Minotaur was absolutely an out-and-out murder machine. The Ogre is broadly used as a roadblock. Now, I think that the first skill I would take on the Ogre is guard, and then after that, I think again you can save up for things like block, pro, stand firm, tentacles if you want to be fun. If you want a killer that doesn't have frenzy, you could put claw on it. They're all good starting skills. But for me, first place you should go is guard. It's a roadblock piece, and go there. Next, we're going to look at the Rat Ogre. And the Rat Ogre is the exact same Rat Ogre you'd see in a Skaven team, even down to the skill accesses here. Movement 6, Strength 5, so all the big guys are Strength 5. It's only armor 9+, not 10+, like the Ogre. But it does have a brand new skill to Blood Bowl 3, which didn't exist in Blood Bowl 2, which is Animal Savagery. So the previous Rat Ogre, if you tried to move it, it had Wild Animal, it wouldn't move on a 4+. Now, Animal Savagery is if you are blitzing and you roll a 1, the animal will try and punch one of its teammates nearby. It'll still then go off and do the blitz, so you can guarantee your player will blitz if you are blitzing with it. If you want to move it, and it is a 4+ activation, then if you have a player stood next to it, you'll punch that player and you'll still walk off. So at the cost of one of your players, this player will always do as it's told, which is unlike any of the other big guys on this team. And that is a bit of a double-edged sword, but it means from a strategy point of view, you can really play around with it. And I think, therefore, it's actually a must-pick on this team. Again, looking at the level ups, I think because it is probably primarily a blitzer, you want to lean into that. So I would save up for block almost immediately. I also think because you might be using it to try and generate one-turns or crowd pushes or whatever, alongside taking guard, which is just a staple skill on big guys, you really want to look at Juggernaut. If you don't want to save up for block, Juggernaut doubles up as both the ability to more likely push things, and when you're blitzing, it protects you from the both down. And then on mutations, again, claws are great, and that shouldn't be overlooked for this player, but it's probably not a primary pick. So just to sum up, I would go Juggernaut, guard, block, probably claw as my skill picks, and I also think stand firm is worth being in there. With all big guys, now pro is reroll 1 dice on a 3+, certainly not a bad shout, and once you've got block, then you can think about pro as another decent skill pick. Something I haven't covered, we are just going to cover now, which is saving up for characteristics. I would never save up for a characteristic on any of the big guys. I think it's a complete waste of time, and there are so many value skills that you'll get, which is just better. Equally, randoming skills doesn't seem like a good idea because you specifically want skills out of certain skill trees, so I would avoid randoming skills or taking characteristics. Right, we're now going to quickly look at the other one of those players. Okay, so this is the Troll. If you've watched the Black Orc guide video, you'll recognise this Troll. It's the same model, but it does have a mutation access. Again, if you really want to take it, like in Underworld in the previous iteration of Blood Bowl, you can put Claw on it, or you can put Tentacles on it. They're probably the two standout picks in the mutations pot. For me, I think I would actually skill this slightly differently. I would go Guard, because it's another roadblock. Then I would take Block, and then I would take Pro. They are the first 3 skills I would take. Then I would take Stand Firm. And then after that, if you're still leveling this player because you're in a perpetual league or you've got a lot of games, then I would look at mutation. And I think that mutation for me is probably Tentacles to try and tie down an opponent. The Troll does have Projectile Vomit, which is a new skill, so just in case you haven't watched any of the other guide videos, then we'll just cover Projectile Vomit. It's a little bit like Stab from the previous game, where it doesn't really have too much of a downside. However, you roll a d6, on a roll of 1 you vomit over yourself, on a roll of 2+ you vomit on someone else. At that point you can then do an armor roll, and if you break the armor you can then do an injury roll. You can only use it once per turn, and it's an okay skill. I don't think it'll see too much play. I think just not doing anything with the Troll is just an out and out better thing to do. So that covers off the big guys. Right, now we're going to go and look at the little guys, the Skaven. The Skaven is a Skaven line rat, and it is movement 7, strength 3, agility 3+, passing 4+, and AV 8+. It has animosity for all teammates, and that's because it believes it's the star of the show, and if it picks up the ball, it will not want to hand it off to anybody. There is a note on the tooltip there that says this does not interact with star players, so if you are running a star player, he will hand the ball off to a star. Now, animosity just means you have to roll a 2+ first to pass that to be able to hand the ball off to someone else. It's not the end of the world, it's just slightly annoying. We look at the skill trees, general access as a primary. We've also got mutation access as a primary, so we can lean into that when we're leveling this player up. And we should also think about what type of what role is this player fulfilling. And for me, it's probably because it's high movement, it's a safety type player, it's a ball sacker. So with that, I think wrestle, tackle, strip ball from the general skill tree make a lot of sense. And the mutation access, 2 heads, and possibly even extra arms mean that your player is a little bit more mobile and can get into places. You could even put frenzy on it. 2 heads, frenzy, movement 7 means you can cover both sidelines from the centre square of the field, and it does lean into the sackability of that player. If you're going to go frenzy, you probably want mutation and go horns. So there's a couple of different ways you can build this player. We look at the strength and agility access. Because there's so many good general skills, I don't really think you need to be leaning into either of those skill trees. If you are going to step into either of them, it's probably the agility skill tree, and it's probably for dodge, just to synergize with things like, 2 heads really, or dodge for just a defensive nature, because the player is quite weak. So that's the Skaven. From a randoming point of view, I probably wouldn't, although there are several general skills you could take. The problem with randoming on this player is that it's got a specific role. If you take a skill that sits outside that role, you've now got to go and look at somebody else to fulfill that role, or you've got a wasted skill slot. So I'd avoid randoming here unless you're just trying to have a bit of fun. Next, we'll cover the Orc. The Orc is a line Orc. Now, on an Orc team, a line Orc is one of the worst players on the team, and that really does actually fit for one of this team, but this player is one of the worst players on the team. However, you will always take it, and you will always take it because it is the highest armoured player on the team, other than the Ogre, at armour 10+. And we've just covered about the Skaven Rat Ogre wanting to punch one of your players before it will go off and do stuff. Well, this player fulfills 2 roles. One, it's great line of scrimmage fodder. You're less likely to lose a player on defence, so put it on the line of scrimmage. And 2, have it follow around like a little puppy dog after your Skaven Rat Ogre, and let the Rat Ogre punch this player if you need to punch one of your own players. The animosity really shouldn't make any difference. It should not be a ball carrier, and it probably won't ever level because you won't be giving it star player points other than the MVP potentially. From a level up perspective, I think the only skill I would be bothered about is block. At high team value, if you still haven't leveled it and it finally levels, I'd go wrestle because it's going on the line of scrimmage. And then if it ever gets any other skills, then I'd probably go in secondary tree and I'd be looking at guard. Other than that, I don't really think anything else is great. I wouldn't bother with a characteristic save. The only time I would be saving for a characteristic is to avoid it leveling any further, and that really covers this player off. Okay, next we're going to look at the Human Thrower, and the Human Thrower is a bit of an odd one, which is that it's really expensive at 75k. All the players we've just covered are all 50k each, so you're paying a 25k premium for pass and safe pair of hands. Unfortunately, it's got animosity to all teammates. So it's got pass, but it won't actually reliably pass. It's also agility 3+, so its base passing is not very reliable. I think the hidden gem in this player, though, is safe pair of hands, which means that when you get knocked over, you can now control where the ball scatter goes. So if things are going wrong, you can at least put that ball scatter into the best possible square for you and not your opponent. And I think sometimes this will get overlooked. So would I run one in a perpetual team? Probably. Would I need to level it up? Yes. Now, with that in mind, general skills. Passing, we need to go and look at some passing skills which make our passing a lot better. If we look at that, accurate makes a lot of sense, so we can pass on a quick or short pass and get +1. Cannoneer, not so much. You could go for Cannoneer and Cloudburster if you're going to build a really, really good passer. But I think for me it's accurate and possibly even running pass, so you can then run and hand the ball off. The other skill in here, which has got nothing to do with passing, but is actually probably the reason to take this player, is Leader, because Leader gives you an extra reroll, and in Blood Bowl 3 we can use more than one reroll on a turn. I think this is a team that benefits from having 4 rerolls overall. So in this skill tree, I think Accurate and Leader And then we want to go into the general skill tree. We want to take block and sure hands as our 4 skills overall. That covers this player off, I think. And I would massively avoid randoming on this player, because if we do that, we will end up with players that it doesn't synergize with its core role, which is carry the ball and potentially throw it to someone better than himself. Okay, I'm going to cover the Dark Elf next, because we've just done the thrower, and the Dark Elf is exactly a Dark Elf lineman, which is movement 6, strength 3, agility 2+, so it's the only Ag 2+ player you've got on the team, or Ag 4 if you play football too. It can sort of pass, unlike the Dark Elf lineman in the actual Dark Elf team, and it's AV8+. Now, look at the skill access first of all. We've got general and we've got agility. Agility means that we can take, where is it? Dodge. There it is. And the general skill tree means we can take block. So that means you can get a block dodge player, which is Ag 2+, very, very easily. And I think it makes a very, very good ball carrier. The problem with this Dark Elf is it also makes a very, very good sacker, because it's got the ability to get in. It also makes quite a nice sideline control player, so you can go frenzy. So there's so many different ways you can build this player. What I think you need to do, viewer, is you need to decide what play you want out of this. Is he a ball carrier? Is he block, dodge, sure hands? Is he a sacker? Is he going to take block, frenzy, tackle? Is he going to be a ball sacker? Is he going to take block, wrestle, tackle, and strip ball? Like, what do you want to do with this guy? The problem is you've only got one of them. So think about this player very carefully when you're leveling him up. I do think that taking a statistic on here is reasonable. The problem is that you're going to get movement almost all of the time. Now, movement 6 to 7 is alright. It's just not super special. And therefore, I think you should probably focus on going block and dodge, or dodge and block, for your core player to start with. And then you can start thinking about other statistics. Other levels that you are going to probably consider: strength for guard, and mutations for 2 heads, because 2 heads, that gets you a pseudo Ag 5 player and lets you do some really fun things with it. Overall, how would I play this player? I would play this player as some sort of frenzy sack player, where I would go block, dodge, 2 heads, frenzy, and see what you can do with it. And I think there's some quite good value in that player. Please tune in and watch one of my runs of this team to see how I actually play it out. Next, we're going to cover the Goblin. The Goblin is indeed just a normal Goblin, and the whole point of this player is to use his ability to take agility skills and to take this skill here, which is Sneaky Git, which means that you will be fouling with this player. That is his entire point. He's nice and cheap. He's going to have Sneaky Git, and once he's got Sneaky Git, if you keep getting him points, then you'll be taking Dirty Player, which is that one there. It is 12-star player points, but that's what you'll be taking. So Sneaky Git, Dirty Player is the whole point of this player. You've only got one, it's fine. I don't think there are any other viable skill trees for him, and that's what I would do with him. You will potentially hear other people talk about taking things like sprint, sure feet, and making him into a one-turning option. I think they're missing the point of the team, but you can do that. It's not wrong, it's just not optimal. And then the last player on this team is the Renegade Dark Elf lineman, and the Renegade Dark Elf lineman is literally the same as a human lineman. Movement 6, strength 3, agility 3+, passing 4+. Now, in all the other team players we've talked about not randoming level ups, I think on this player, because he is going to perform several different roles, the first couple of players you could level up and you could take randoms. Sure, you might end up with some weird players like Dauntless or a Frenzy or a Shadowing, but there's an awful lot of good skills in here. We've got block, we've got Dirty Player, we've got kick, we've got wrestle, tackle you can actually use, and we've also got pro, which is not a bad skill anymore. And you can even potentially use frenzy, although it is a bit of an odd one. So I think you're going to need to build some line of scrimmage fodder. I think you need to build a kick player. I think you need some support players, so they are block guards. And really, we also need to build ourselves a killer if you're not going to be using and blitzing with big guys. So we need to build with Mighty Blow, and we need to build with block and tackle. So there's an awful lot of players, a lot of skills that need to go into these players, and I think there's a lot of different ways you can build them. Mutation, we've got claws, so you could build a Mighty Blow, claw, block, tackle, frenzy player. What a player! However, it will be very expensive, but it'll be very dangerous. So that's all the players, that's all the level ups. I hope you find that useful. Now we're going to go and talk about strategy and sort of how to play the team along with the actual rosters themselves. Right, okay, let's look at the rosters. I've actually split this into 3 main categories of roster, of which there are many, many other variations, but these broadly give you the broad brushstrokes. So, roster number 1. This is for having all 3 of the big guys, and I've gone for the Ogre, which is probably the best of the big guys. We've got a Minotaur for a bit of blitzing. We've got another Troll for another roadblock, and then we've gone and put linemen on there. I've got 1 Skaven, I've got 1 Orc, and I've got 1 Dark Elf as my ball carrier. We have only got 11 players, and the bad news is we've only got 2 rerolls. However, I have managed to put 4 dedicated fans in there total, so I got my free 1, 3 more in on top. So we will generate a bit of extra money fairly quickly. Now, for me, I think what I'd spend that extra money on initially is I'd buy a 12th player, and then I'd buy a 3rd reroll. If you want to go 12th player and pick up, I'd go lineman, reroll, thrower. Players will die, and when you then want to save up for the apothecary, the thrower is going to be the 13th player, replacing one of the players that's probably died, and at that point you can then start trying to skill into it with the skills I've mentioned in the previous section. Leader in particular is something that we want to get into. Yeah, the strength here is all the big guys. The weakness is it's only 11 players, it's only 2 rerolls. I don't think this is a very strong roster, and it's not the one I would recommend to you, because the one I would recommend to you is this one. This one, I'm going to jump straight down to the rerolls. The rerolls are really expensive on this team at 70k each, but I've managed to get all 3 of them in. We've got them all in, and we've got 12 players, because what I've done is I've dropped away the Minotaur. The Minotaur at 150k has let me pick up 12 players. So we've got the Troll and the Ogre. We've still got a bit of strength on the team. We're not going to get bullied by too many teams. We've got the Dark Elf for moving the ball around. I've got the Orc for the other line of scrimmage. We've got the Skaven. We've got the Goblin for fouling, and then we've got a load of linemen. I think this is the best roster because it also has a little bit of cash generation from the dedicated fans, and this is the one that I would recommend you probably start with, or some variant of it. You could drop some dedicated fans and you can upgrade the Ogre to a Minotaur if you want a bit of punch. What you can't really get very easily without sacrificing down back to 11 players is to get the Ogre and the Minotaur. The Troll is by far the cheaper of the 4 big guys at 115k. The 2 that you're not seeing on this picture are 150k, so you need to go find 35k of stuff, which really is sacrificing out one of your players. That's for me the strongest roster. However, there is the 1 big guy variant, which means that you can do even more fun stuff with it. So I've gone for the Minotaur, which is the most expensive as your probable blitzer. I've got the Dark Elf, so we've got a bit of ball control, and we've gone for 12 players, 3 rerolls, and all of the fans. Now, if you don't want all of the fans, we've still got 15k in the bank. If you refund 1 fan, we can upgrade a lineman to a thrower, which means we can start saving for our 4th reroll via leader really quickly. This team's okay, and it's probably a little bit, will play very similarly to if you played humans in the previous iteration of Blood Bowl. It'll play a little bit like that, except your ball carrier is just better, and you've got 12 players. So it'll play very similarly to humans. Overall. One good thing about this roster is the actual team value when playing and matching is only 935, so you will also pick up a little bit of inducement money, which you might be able to just tailor to get something that you'll need moving forward. So I think for me that the choices are between rosters 2 and 3, and you pick what you think suits you the best. I would actually recommend you try all 3 starts out and see what works for you. That talks about the 3 rosters. I do want to just cover off a little bit about strategy in terms of how you want to play the team, both on defense and offense. On offense, the team only broadly has movement 6 across the board, and as such, it's a team that you really want to keep moving forwards with all the time. If you let the board state get very static, because you don't have lots of move, you will not be able to get round your opponent without killing off 3 or 4 players. So, we take the big guys, we shove them into their face, and we make most teams deal with them. Be careful against the strength 4 teams of Orcs, Chaos, Nurgle, but against everybody else, really get those big guys rammed into someone else's face, preferably in the centre of the field. That gives you a pivot. Once you've got the ball carrier directly behind that, you will then start blitzing and moving down either the left or the right flank, and take as many players as you can and just charge down the side. I think Chaos Renegades are offensively challenged, and I would take the scores that were presented to me. Now on defense, I'd use the same concept, which is the big guys stay in the middle. You can jam them in if you think you can win that war, and then you want your other players to protect everywhere as a sort of a semicircle screen behind that. You hopefully have picked up some guard on some of the Marauder linemen, and they go and support the big guys, while you then force your opponent to pick a side. Because you haven't committed to either the left or the right flank, once they've committed to the side they're going down, you can then move from the centre to either the left or the right to shut them down. The big guys should be there to stop the pivot back round from them, so that if they've attacked the left, they can't then swing back down to your right, because you will not be able to respond. So the big guys are there to gum things up and slow stuff down, and hopefully give you a numbers advantage. And then on top of all of those things, you should hopefully have a goblin once we've advanced a few levels, and the sneaky git goblin should be running in and kicking someone in the head and trying to give you a numbers advantage. The whole thing hinges on you being able to get some player advantage somewhere, either by numerically going players up via killing things with Mighty Blow and Claws, or by fouling, or by using the big guys to trade out for 2-to-1 advantages or 3-to-1 advantages across the field, because the rest of your team is only strength 3. You need a numerical advantage if you want to be able to do anything with the rest of the team. Right, let's go and look at inducements. Right, so this is the inducements phase, and here I have got plenty of time so we can talk about all the different inducements that are available. On this, I think there really are probably 3 things, and they follow in to most teams, which is the wizard. We can use the fireball or zap spell. If you've got 150k and nothing more, a wizard is possibly, depending on your match, one of your go-to inducements. It does depend a little bit whether or not you're running a dirty player. If you're running a dirty player, the choice between wizard and bribe is broadly how many players have they got, and how likely are you going to be able to knock them over and foul them. If you need some control, it's the wizard. If you think you need a damage, it's the bribe, and you're probably picking from one or either of those. This one is a new one in terms of Blood Bowl 2 to Blood Bowl 3, which is the bias referee. If your opponent is going to be fouling you a lot and you don't want to lose players, bias referee can swing that round, and it also is a deterrent to fouling. So consider this one. It's a bit of a situation specific one, but when it does come up and the situation is there, you certainly should consider it. Everything else on here is the same as in previous versions of the game. That's an absolute no-no, so just don't do that. And that's also an absolute no-no as well. So just please avoid these two because they are terrible value for money. If we go and look at the star players, Chaos do have a good selection of star players, and it massively now depends on how much money you've got to spend. So the first of the good star players, or the very strong star players, is Lord Borak the Spoiler, who is for 260k. 260k. He's strength 5, but he also has Dirty Player +2. So he has got the ability to absolutely destroy teams with his Dirty Player +2 thing, and he's also got Sneaky Git, so he's less likely to get sent off. I do think you can't take this player without access and support of a bribe on top, so really you need to be thinking that this is a 360k star player. But if you have got 360k to spend, Lord Borak is not a bad pick whatsoever. He also synergizes with the 3 potential star strength 5s you've got on the field, so do consider this one. In a playoff match, Hackfang Scuttlespike is one of the best star players in the game, and he has got the ability to steal the ball and run away with it, and is agility 2+, but he's also got extra arms, and he's also got 2 heads, so he is absolutely bonkers and can get through. He's a bit like, well, it's like adding a Skaven Gutter Runner to a fighty team. It just adds that dimension that they just simply don't have. And so if you needed to win a game, look no further than Hackflem. He will guarantee you scores when games where you just might not be able to score. Bile Rot Vomit Flesh is a strength 5 player. For me, I really wouldn't consider him. He is quite cheap, so he's okay, but he's not great. His probably best characteristic is the Dirty Player +2, and again, you'd need a bribe to protect him. He is strength 5, he is only 180k. He's probably there when you've lost one of access to your main big guys, possibly. He's alright. And then we scroll across here. We've got 3 other star players to talk about. Helmut Wolf, he slots in at the bribe or wizard choice. Helmut Wolf does have pro, and he is pretty dangerous. And so if you haven't got your dirty player sneaky git combo and have got 140k, Helmut Wolf's your man to step into that void. Once you've got that, I don't think Helmut Wolf has much of a value, other than he's just a chainsaw and people will be terrified of him. Next, we've got Morgan Thorg. Morgan Thorg is probably one of the 4 or 5 best star players in the game, and in Games Workshop have released a new category of star player called Mega Stars, and Morgan Thorg falls into that. Why, you might wonder? Well, strength 6. He is AV 11 plus, he just doesn't go away. He's movement 6, so he's really fast. And he's got block, and he's got mighty blow +2. So all the other +2s we've talked about so far are when you have already knocked someone over. No, this guy just punches you in the face with mighty blow +2. If you're an armor 17, that means you only need to roll a 6+ to be causing an injury. That's insane. This is broken and really, really, really. Games Workshop, if you're watching this, can you please fix this player? He's stupid. He is broken. He should not be in the game as he currently stands. There, that is as strong as terms as I can take it. And therefore, we've got the final star player, who's someone you just shouldn't be taking. There are so many better options out there, which is this one. It's styled around a rotter, and it's, well, what do we got here? We've got Prehensile Tail, we've got Tackle, we've got 2 heads, we've got Wrestle. So we've got Wrestle, Tackle, 2 heads. Not terrible, there are just better choices out there. And then the final tab we've got are the Mercenaries. If you have lost one of your main players and you need to replace him, then you can come in here and you can pick out Minotaur or the Ogre. And you might want to consider this depending on exactly how much money you've got. I think if you are going to do this, what you want to be looking at doing is then adding an extra skill onto that player. So you'll be playing the base cost of the player, plus 50k for a skill, plus 30k for hiring the player as a mercenary. So they're quite expensive, but you can start to tailor the player to the matchup you're involved in. So, now, I've covered everything I can think of as a starter for 10 in terms of this guide video. The only thing we've not covered off is gameplay, but if you want to see gameplay of any of the races, not just this one, come and tune in to the rest of my YouTube channel, or come and watch me on Twitch, and we will be covering 10 game series very early on in the life of Blood Bowl 3 for all teams, so hopefully you can then see some actual gameplay footage and see how to play the team. Thank you very much for watching. My name's AndyDavo. You've been fantastic, and I'll see you in the next guide. Thank you.